All right, yo. Boy Majestic, Natty Daddy Falkor's back. Jesus. Oh my God, my beautiful people are here today. Oh man. It's a great day, as always, to see my fucking Falkor cartel representing today. Oh man. What a great day. Oh, good to see everyone here. Kemi, Ellie, SJB Dweller, Outdoor Loser, and Yao Walt. Oh man, my beautiful people are here today. My beautiful weirdos. Uh, oh man. Enough blowhole talk for one day. Oh man. My God. Oh, Jesus. Hey, Jeff W. Oh, nice for you on the shop. Boy, welcome, my friend. Did you get your puka beats? Oh man. Oh God. Oh, love it. Oh, Jesus. I love you guys. Good to see everyone. All right. So, I activate this guy. See this beautiful, ugly mug. So tonight we got some good stuff in store. Um, got some Mr. Ballin and some good old animal attack stories. So, encounters. So, let's get it started. It's good to see everyone again. As always, my beautiful cartel members. Oh yeah, I really want to start the night off with probably my cleanest, best pleasure videos. Newest video ever from one of those weirdos. I got a giant surprise today. And one of those weirdos, you just made it just in time. I have to play this on stream today, right now. This is literally the best surprise I got today. Oh. And Ricky Spanish! What's up? Nice for you to stop by.
For you to stop by. Nice for you to stop by. Your boy Majestic is back. Let's go. Falkor Cartel here. Nice for you to stop by. Nice for you to stop by. Nice for you to stop by. And good evening. Nice for you to stop by. Good to see you. Nice for y'all to stop by. Thanks for stopping by. Well, not really stopping by. You're Majestic. Shut up. Oh my God, I love that.
Majestic! Oh my God, I love how I get pissed off with myself.
Nice for you to stop by. 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 Good God! I fall off the turnip truck. Nice for you to stop by. You know the name of the game this bitch showed me. Nice for you to stop by. Nice for you to stop by. Jesus! Nice for y'all to stop by. Thanks for stopping by. And thanks for everyone stopping by today. Love you guys.
As always. My God, it's so weird seeing yourself, too. Oh my God. That's really weird. But I love it. Oh my God. This. Hey, Turk Ferguson, nice for you to stop by, my friend. Good evening. Oh, I got, yeah, since, oh, man. Yes. So let's kick the night off with Mr. Ballin. No, SJB, not blowholes today. No blowholes. Well, hold on to your blowholes. Day Converse the Dark. Oh, my man. What's up, brother? Good to see you, my good friend. Thanks for stopping by. God damn it. Here we go. Let's start the night off.
Michael Jackson fan club as
Here we go. The Pinching Man. It's what we're starting the night off with. I've been wanting to watch this one, as always.
as well as the German axolotl fish fan club. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
Here we go. It's called The Pinching Man. Well, I respect the blowhole. There just won't be any blowholes in this stream tonight. I mean, in these calls tonight. There might not be. I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of them. Actually, majority of these I haven't seen, so there might be a blowhole involved or two.
In 2014, a young woman named Jen was sitting in her sister's living room, looking out their back window where her son and her two nephews were playing. And as she's watching them, one of her nephews, named Harrison, walked over to this tree and began peeling the bark off of it.
Yeah, Turd Ferguson, I've been wanting to watch this one, and I'm so happy that you showed up because I specifically made sure to have this one. And I've been always wanting to watch this one. And this is one of the few, like, Mr. Ballin videos I haven't seen. Thank you.
Of the tree. And for Jen, this
Thank you for suggesting this one, my friend.
Brought back a very strange childhood memory that she hadn't thought about in decades. And without meaning to actually say the words out loud, Jen kind of blurted out what was going through her head, which was so weird. And her mother, who was in the other room, heard her say that, and she yells into the room, "Hey Jen, is everything okay? What's so weird?" And Jen, feeling a little bit embarrassed that she just said that out loud and that her mom heard her, is quick to try to dismiss it by saying, "Oh no, sorry, it's nothing. I didn't mean to say that." But as she's trying to dismiss it, her mom had walked into the living room where Jen was and saw Jen was looking out the back window towards the boys. And so her mom walked right up next to Jen and goes, "What are the boys doing out there that's so weird? Are they doing something they shouldn't be doing?" And Jen's like, no, it has nothing to do with the kids. I just saw Harrison, who was doing something that reminded me of some weird thing that happened to me, and I blurted out my reaction to it. That's all. And Jen's mom looks at her and says, "Well, now you got to tell me the memory because I'm totally intrigued." Jen says, "Okay, Mom, I'll tell you the story." I don't know if Frankie's mom ever told you this or not, but when I was 8 years old, I spoke to Frankie, and he was doing some
Hey, Mandy S. Nice for you to show, boy.
Homework, and he told me to come meet him outside of his house, and that when he was done, we could meet up and go play together. And so I walked over to his house, and I was standing across the street in front of that small group of trees that we called the Pine Cone Forest, even though it was just a handful of trees, but we all called it that. Anyways, I was standing over there, and I was just kind of mindlessly peeling the bark off of the tree. I don't even remember consciously deciding to do it. And so as I'm peeling the bark off the tree, watching Frankie's house, waiting for him to come outside, I noticed to my right, there's this guy walking through the forest towards me. And I look at him, and I've never seen him before, and before he got even within 10 feet of me, I could smell cigarettes. He reeked of cigarettes, and his teeth were very yellow. He's missing a number of teeth, and I noticed right away when I looked at his hands, I don't know why I was looking at his hands, but I looked at his hands, and he had these pointy yellow fingernails that almost looked like he was intentionally growing them out to be long and jagged. And he comes walking up to me and stops completely in my personal space. And instead of looking at me, he looks at the spot on the tree where I had been peeling the bark off. And he's literally like 1 foot away from me, so close that I had to lean back because I didn't want to be rude and run away. So I'm leaning back to avoid being right next to this guy. And all I can smell is cigarette smoke. And he turns from the tree to me and he goes, "What do you think you're doing?" And I'm like this, and I'm like, "I'm waiting for my friend." And he says, "No, what are you doing to the tree?" And I remember looking at him and then the tree and saying, "Peeling the bark off?" And that's when he raised his hand up and pinched my arm with his nails, not with the pads of his fingers, but he was using his nails, and he's pinching down on my skin, and through gritted teeth, he says, "How would you like it if someone peeled your skin off?" I remember as he's pinching me, I was so terrified that I didn't do anything. I was like in a trance and just stood there looking at him, wondering what's about to happen. And then as luck would have it, Frankie's mom just happened to come outside and yelled, "Hey, come on inside, Frankie's done with his homework." And so that kind of broke me out of my trance. I pulled my arm away and I began running away from him across the street towards Frankie's house. And I turned around once, kind of expecting him to be chasing me, but he wasn't. He was still standing next to the tree that I had pulled the bark off of, except now he was watching me, and I ran up onto the porch and ran inside, and that was that. I remember wanting to tell you about it when I got home, but for some reason I didn't. And then days turned into weeks, turned into months, and before long it was just a distant memory, and I never really thought about it, and at some point did forget about it, until just now when I saw Harrison peeling the bark off of the tree, and it brought it back, and that's why you heard me say, "So weird." That was my reaction to it, because I'm wondering, who was that guy and what happened to him? Like, that's so creepy. After Jen told her mother this story, she was expecting her mom to be a little bit horrified by it, because it is a pretty startling story about her own child. But Jen's thinking it's been so long since this happened and nothing came of it that her mom would probably quickly move on from it. But Jen noticed her mom looked very concerned, and she turned to her and she goes, "Mom, this happened like 2 decades
Oh my God, this is already intense.
ago. Like, this is not a big deal." And her mom looks down for a second and then looks up, and she has this look of guilt on her face. And she says to her daughter, "Jen, I should have told you this when it happened, but you were so young, and I felt like it was going to ruin your childhood, and so I just didn't tell you, and it seemed like you forgot about it, but obviously you didn't, and so I guess you got to hear the full story now." Jen's confused at this point, and she says, "What are you talking about?" And her mother, who now looked really uncomfortable, she's touching her face, and she looks very anxious, she says to Jen, "It's time you learned who that man really was." Before Jen could ask any more questions, her mom just says, "Honey, just sit down and I will explain everything to you." So they sit down, and Jen's mom is still acting pretty uncomfortable. This is obviously a difficult subject for her. And she starts by saying, "Okay, so do you remember how in our neighborhood where you grew up, everybody seemed to know each other? It was a really tight community of people." And Jen's like, "Yeah, I remember that." And her mom was like, "Well, because of that, it made it really easy to spot people that were, outsiders, that didn't live in the neighborhood. And so if a car came down the street and I didn't recognize it, I would find myself looking out the window and watching the car to see where it was going, because there's no reason to be in this neighborhood unless you're a visitor or you live here." And so I was in the habit of people watching anybody that showed up that I didn't recognize. And I know a bunch of the other mothers in the neighborhood did the same thing, one of them being Frankie's mom. Anyways, on the same day that creep came up to you and pinched your arm when you were 8 years old in 1995, well, that morning, Frankie's mom, Sonia, she happened to look out her front window and she saw a vehicle she didn't recognize. And it was a work van, a white work van. It didn't have windows in the back, and it was parked across the street near the pine cone forest. And so she assumed it must be a work truck, and whoever had brought it here was, working on one of the houses in the neighborhood. But where it was parked, it was not close to any one particular house. And there was lots of places you could have parked on the street. So it seemed odd, if you're going to be doing work on a house, that you wouldn't just park in front of the house. Like, why would you park, inconveniently farther away in front of this random forest? And so that got her thinking that something's up with this van. But she didn't think it was bad. She just was trying to make sense of it. And so all morning she found herself going to the window and looking out to see if someone was going to claim this.
What if, you look out a window and then, I always had that fear as a kid, looking out a window some night randomly and then, seeing, almost like a van out there and then have someone, just, looking, right into the window or some shit like that. I was always afraid of something like that happening. I don't know why.
This van, but she never saw anybody go near it. She didn't see workers going in and out of it. She didn't see any activity that was related to the van. It was just this empty van parked randomly across the street. And by the afternoon, when still no one had claimed this vehicle, she was getting ready to call the police. So that same day, you and Frankie had spoken on the phone and planned to meet up at the Pinecone Forest after he was done with
This is Jugga Willie. Nice for you to show boy.
Homework, and he didn't tell his mom about these plans, and so she didn't know that you would be very close to this van. Had she have known that, she would have told you to not wait out there, but instead to come right inside and don't go near this van. So at some point in the afternoon, when Sonia's getting ready to call the police, and you were actually already over at the Pinecone Forest waiting for Frankie, Sonia's looking out the window and she sees the back 2 doors fly open, and that guy who pinched you jumps out of the back and starts running into the Pinecone Forest. And from where Sonia's looking, she can only see part of the forest. The other portion of it is to the right, that's out of her view through this window. And so she turns and runs in her house to the side window of her house, and she looks out at that section of the Pinecone Forest where this guy has run to, and she sees you standing in front of the tree, and she sees this guy sprint right up to you and sees him pinch you in the arm, and he's talking to you. And that's when she ran out onto the porch and yelled for you to come inside. And she would tell me later that when she did that, she tried to sound very natural. She was worried if she sounded like this was an emergency, not only would it frighten you, but it might trigger this stranger to grab you or take you, because now he's been made. You know, someone realizes he's a bad guy and he might take you. And so the whole time she's watching you, she was watching him to see if he was going to chase you. And so when you came inside, she did her best to be totally calm and told you to go play with Frankie. And as soon as you were out of the room, she ran around the house and locked all the doors, all the windows, and then called me. And we decided it made sense to call the police. Even though you were safely in the house, we didn't know who this guy was, and it seemed like he was intentionally targeting you, like he was waiting for you the whole time. And so Sonia calls the police, and a police cruiser was sent over to our neighborhood, and they quickly found the white van that matched the description. They pull up next to it, and they walk to the driver's side, and sitting in...
Free candy. God. Really? There's no way. Jesus Christ.
That matched the description. They pull up next to it and they walk to the driver's side, and sitting inside the car.
Well, I know this isn't the real like that partake in the story, but like seriously, oh my God.
Matches the description of what Sonia gave.
Like seriously, that's not like a fucking like dead giveaway.
And he's acting really weird. You know, he looked like he was on drugs, or maybe...
Fuck being incognito. Jesus Christ.
He was drunk, or something was wrong with him. Something was off about him. And so the officers had him step out of the car, and they searched his car, and in the front 2 seats, there was nothing but, you know, cigarette butts and trash.
Aww.
And there was a partition wall between the front 2 seats and the back workspace of the van. They went around to the back of the van, and they see this guy has screwed a latch onto the back of the 2 doors, right across the middle, and there's a padlock. So there's an additional lock on this back door. Clearly, he doesn't want anybody getting in the back of this thing. And so the police turn to this guy, and they're like, "We need to get in the back of your truck. Can you please open this?" And at first, he was, you know, making excuses why he couldn't open it, but finally he relented and pulled out a special keychain he was carrying that had 2 distinct keys on it. And he used one of them to undo the padlock. He opened that up, and then he swung open the doors, and he backed up. And the police look inside, and they can't believe what they're looking at. Inside of this van, all over every surface in the back, were pictures of you taped to the walls, to the ground, to the back. I mean, everywhere you looked, there was a picture of you. And they weren't just recent pictures of you. There was at least a couple pictures of you when you were 6 years old, and you were 8 when he approached you. So we know he was following you for at least 2 years. Also in the back of the van were binoculars, as well as a camera that presumably he was using to take these pictures of you. But that's not even...
Thanks, Rose Scholar. Thanks a lot. I think I got myself a joint. A yoint.
The worst part. After
Damn,
this guy got arrested,
one
of the officers pulled out that keychain that had the key to the padlock on the back of his van, and he noticed the other key on the keychain was not just a duplicate key to the same padlock. It was a different, unique key. And so the police go over to this guy and they show him the key, and they say, "What is this to?" And he says, "It's to my storage locker." And so the police track down a storage locker, and they go over there and they unlock the lock with the key, and they open the door, and what's inside is straight out of a nightmare. The entire storage locker, the ceiling, the floor, the walls, all of it was covered in clear plastic wrap. And behind the plastic wrap, you could see on the walls were hundreds more pictures of you. And in the middle of the storage locker was a dentist chair that had been anchored to the ground.
What?
Next to the dentist chair was this silver tray like you would see in more pictures. And behind the plastic wrap, you could see on the walls were hundreds more pictures of you. And in the middle of the storage locker was a dentist chair that had been anchored to the ground. Next to the dentist chair was this silver tray like you would
That's creepy as fuck.
see in a dentist's office, except on it were all these knives, and they were not surgical or medical knives. They were like meat cleavers and hunting knives, crude instruments. And then next to that on a table was an anatomy book where he had used printouts of you to bookmark different parts of the book that he was taking notes on and highlighting, all of which had to do with the female anatomy. In the back of the locker was a rotted mattress that was just sitting on the ground, and anchored in the back on the wall were chains with handcuffs extending off of them, and then next to the bed were dozens of empty 5-gallon drums. When the police showed us pictures of the inside of his van, we were very shaken up. It was just so awful to imagine someone taking advantage of you in that way, watching you. But when they showed us pictures of the chamber that he had created inside of his storage locker, that's just something I'll never get over. He clearly had plans for you. After hearing this story from her mother, Jen is a mixture of angry with her mom for not telling her sooner, but also sad, that her mom had to go through that with her
Bro, it's like Dexter almost, but
child, because now
different.
Jen is a mother, and she can only imagine how horrible that must have been for her then and even still now. And so all Jen could think to do was give her mom a hug. After they embraced, Jen asked her mom, what happened to this guy? Where is he? Did he go to jail? And her mom told her that he had confessed to stalking Jen, and he confessed that everything they found in the storage locker in his van was his, and that he understood the implications, but he never gave his real motives for it or really what his intentions were. He was ultimately put into a high security mental institution for the criminally insane, and her mom said she has no idea if he's still alive or if he's been transferred, but that was the last she knew about him. And so Jen wound up doing some homework and figured out where he was being held, and she asked to have a meeting with him because she wanted to ask him to his face, what were you planning to do to me? I want to know why you did this. And he agreed to take this meeting, but the day before they were supposed to have it, he took his own life. And so Jen doesn't know if that was brought on by their impending meeting. It certainly seems likely, but unfortunately, that's it. She doesn't get any more answers.
Wow.
And it will end with a big question mark of what was he going to do to me and why? So that's going to do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's story.
Wow. Wow. We're starting it good tonight, people. Jesus. That was a good one. Bro, that was really creepy. Hey, dude. Third Ferguson. Holy shit, you tied that one good. Oh, man. All right. Let's go with, well, let's go with, okay. Let's go with the top 3 scariest murder. Wow. Majestic. Top 3 scariest murders from Mr. Ballin.
A couple days ago, I was researching topics for this channel, and I found this amazing true crime case from the 1980s. And I began researching it, and the first thing that pops up is HBO Max has just released a 6-part docudrama called The Murder at the White House Farms, and it's covering this case. And so I'm like, oh great, I'll watch the first 10 minutes of the first episode. It'll give me a good mental picture for this story when I cover it on my channel. And I hit play on the first episode and literally stayed up all night, binge watching all 6 episodes. It's so good. The show is so good. I already knew what was going to happen. and I loved it. The acting is incredible. They have 3 actors from the Game of Thrones that are lead characters in the show, and that's a big deal. Game of Thrones is pretty epic too. The next morning, I opened my emails, and sitting in my inbox is a message from HBO Max saying, hey, we'd love it if you could help us promote our new show, The Murder at the White House Farms. And I thought that was so funny. I'm like, that's a sign. So I'd like to give a huge thanks to HBO Max for sponsoring today's video. The link to their brand
That's why I carry my 357 Tarish as my everyday carry.
new 6-part docudrama
God damn, I love that gun. My 357.
called The Murders at the White House Farms is in my description below, but be careful. If you click on it, it is a very addicting show. And if you're still on the fence about it and you're like, I don't know if I want to watch this or not, well, the first story I'm covering today on my top 3 list is The Murders at the White House Farms. But before we get started, please invite the like button over to your house for a sleepover, and then while they're sleeping, buzz a square of hair off their head. All right, let's get into today's stories. At 3:26 a.m. on August 7th, 1985, a very distraught man called the police and he said, I think my father is in mortal danger. He lives down the road from me. I was just on the phone with him and it seems like something is totally wrong. Can you please go check on him? The police tell him to calm down and explain really what's going on here, what happened on the phone. And so the man...
Yeah, that's kind of disturbing when killers actually have anatomy books and stuff. Shows like what they're kind of trying to do, and it's kind of, yeah, it is actually really disturbing.
Man whose name was Jeremy, said his dad called him and he was talking about his daughter, so Jeremy's sister, and her name was Sheila. And he's like, Sheila's gone crazy. She's gone berserk.
No, don't have Mr. Bong shaking.
I think she has a gun. And Jeremy's telling police that he didn't know what his dad was talking about, and he's trying to get more information from his dad. He's like, what do you mean she's got a gun? What's going on over there? But at some point in this phone call with his father, the phone line just cuts out. And Jeremy's left with all these questions that have gone unanswered. He tried calling back, but it didn't go through, and that's when he called the police. The police asked Jeremy if he had heard any shots fired in the background before the phone cut out. And Jeremy says, no, but my sister is schizophrenic, she's got a bad temper, and she had been fighting with my parents all week, in particular with my dad. And right before the phone cut out, my dad sounded really scared, like something bad was about to happen or was happening. And so we need to get over there right now. And so the police say, okay, we're going to check it out right now. So they hang up with Jeremy and the police head down the road towards White House Farms, where Jeremy's father lives. They park a little ways
your go-to, SJB.
away from the house itself, safely behind a wall and some trees, because they don't want to go too close in case Sheila really does have a gun and starts shooting at them. As the police are getting out of their vehicle, another car comes driving down the road from the same direction the police had come from. The police tell them to stop, and the person gets out, and it turns out it's Jeremy. He didn't live that far away, and he comes running over, and he's like, we gotta go in there, you have to go in there right now. And the police are like, we're not gonna do that, you stay with your car. Before the police were prepared to go into this house, they wanted to scope it out and get a sense of what was going on, because they really didn't know anything about the house besides what Jeremy told them. So a small group of police officers goes behind this other building that's kind of adjacent to the White House Farms, but pretty close to the actual farmhouse. And they go around the backside and they peek around the corner and they start looking at the house. And it's still dark outside. And there's a couple of lights on inside the house and there's no movement, there's no sound, and they're just staring at it. And then one of the officers notices movement, or what he thinks is movement, up in the second floor. And the group of them back up behind the building. They didn't want to be seen. They were worried if Sheila saw them, it would trigger her to harm the other people in the house or harm herself. So they back up away from this building, making sure to stay out of sight of that second floor window and really out of sight of any of the windows on this farmhouse. And they go back to the intersection where the police cars are and where Jeremy is, and they decide they're going to take the diplomatic approach. And so they call in a negotiator who, with a bullhorn, goes up behind that little building, and they start calling out to Sheila, trying to get her to peacefully put her weapon down and come outside. But there's no sound in the house, there's no more movement in the house as far as anyone can tell, and this turns into a multi-hour long standoff where no one comes out of the house, No one goes into the house, and then the sun comes up and the police are starting to get frustrated, and so they eventually call the negotiator back and they say, okay, we're going to need to make entry. A small group of police assaulters began making their way up towards the farmhouse. They get up to the door, it's locked. They try the other door, it's locked. All the windows are locked. And so they bring up a sledgehammer, smash on the front door, and they make entry into this hallway. They immediately make a right, and they're getting ready to confront Sheila wherever she is, but they don't see her. They go all the way down this hallway, and it opens up into the kitchen. And hunched over the stove is a man who's clearly deceased, who winds up being Jeremy's father. He had been shot to death, and he's laying in the kitchen. So they find him, they scan the rest of the kitchen, and they look all around the first floor, and there's no one else down there. And this whole time, they're not hearing any other noises in the house. It's totally silent. They make their way
Holy shit. Hell yeah, Jugga Willie. Fucking love it.
upstairs, and as soon as they get to the top of the stairs, they go right into the first room on the right, and laying on the bed is a deceased
Nice
older
MP5.
woman who's also been shot to death,
MPK5.
and that would wind up being Jeremy's mother. Laying on the ground next to the bed was a woman who appeared to be in her late 20s, who would wind up being Jeremy's sister, so Sheila, the one who had gone berserk apparently according to the father. She's laying on the ground, and she has a rifle that's over her chest, and the barrel is pointed up towards her head, and she has a gunshot wound that's going in underneath her chin, and so she's deceased as well. The police leave that room, they go across the hall into another bedroom, and when they go inside, they find two more bodies that are both laying in their beds. They were 6-year-old twins. They were Sheila's sons. They had both been shot to death as well. After that, there was nobody else in the house, so all of the family has been wiped out. Very quickly, this case was labeled a clear-cut murder-suicide perpetrated by Sheila. She had a history of mental illness, she had apparently gone berserk that night, and she had a gun, everything fit. And so the police were ready to just write this off as a murder-suicide, especially with the amount of media attention this case got. There was a lot of pressure to just solve this case and move on. And so murder-suicide became the answer, and they were not looking for any other answer. But there was one detective that was not willing to accept that this was clearly a murder-suicide, and he had a couple reasons for it. The first thing he noticed, because he was there when the bodies were discovered, was Sheila was carrying a rifle that had a 10-round magazine, and Sheila did not have any pockets on the clothes she had on when they found her. That's important because she fired 25 shots. So that required 2 reloads, except the ammunition to this gun was downstairs, and a lot of the shooting happened upstairs. So after her first volley of fire on the second floor, where presumably you have at least a couple people that are still totally alive, she had to walk downstairs, reload the gun, come back upstairs, do her second volley of fire, go back downstairs, reload that second time, and then she finishes her course of fire. And it made him wonder, why didn't anybody try to stop her while she was doing the reload? Because it required going all the way down, getting the rounds, jamming them into the magazine, putting it into the gun, and then going back upstairs. That's a lot of time that other people could have potentially tried to stop her, or at a minimum, just tried to escape. But it was like everybody just laid in bed. It was like they didn't...
Yeah. It's like someone could have stopped something.
know what was happening.
I feel like a plot twist is coming.
Despite so many rounds being fired very close to them. Stan also found out Sheila did not have extensive weapons training, and so she wouldn't be natural at reloading a weapon. And so for her to go down and reload twice and not chip any of her nails, she had long painted nails, that seemed like a bit of a stretch, because that requires pretty coordinated movements. And for her to never have done that before and just to be able to easily reload, that seems like a stretch too. Stan also figured out there was a window that had a faulty latch on it, that if you pulled lightly on it, it would stay locked. But if you pulled hard and kind of jostled it around, it could open and it could shut, which means the house was not secure when they got there, even though they thought it was. And that was a big part of their whole, this is a murder-suicide, because Sheila locked all the doors and windows before she committed this crime. But if any of those doors or windows were open, it kind of leaves open the opportunity for someone else to have gotten in there and gotten out before the police. But the biggest discovery by far that puts all the others to shame is something Stan found under the stairs inside the house. And everything before that, all the evidence that Stan was presenting to the other officers saying, hey, we should take a look at this. I don't know if this is a murder-suicide. I think there might be potential for somebody else to be responsible. Well, no one was taking him seriously until he came to the table with what he found underneath the stairs. Everybody had to stop what they were doing and say, okay, yeah, we need to look closer at this. And so if you want to learn more about that, go ahead and click on the link inside of the description. It will bring you to the landing page where you can watch this series that I've been raving about. It's on HBO Max and it's called The Murders at the White House Farm. And it does a great job of showcasing.
Oh, God damn it. Now I have to watch the show now.
This huge find and then the follow-on plot twist.
Oh, boy. Oh, yeah, here we go.
On the morning of November 13th, 1974, 6 members of the DeFeo family were asleep in their home in Amityville, New York. The 7th member of the family, Ron, was sitting on his bed in the basement. At around 1 a.m., he gets up off his bed, he grabs a rifle, and he starts walking up the stairs. He goes across the first floor, goes up
Oh, shit. Good night, Ellie, and welcome, Rachel D. Thanks for stopping by, and thanks for coming by.
second floor stairs, and he gets to the second floor landing, and he walks right into his parents' bedroom, which was totally dark besides this little candle that had been lit next to his father's bedside. And he raises his rifle and he puts 2 rounds into his father's back. And then as soon as his father is still, he aims at his mother and he shoots her 2 times. And then he puts the gun down and he walks out and he goes across the hall into his brother's room. He raises his rifle and he fires 1 shot into his 12-year-old brother Mark, and then he aims at his 9-year-old brother John and he fires 1 shot into him as well. Then he leaves their bedroom and he walks down the hall to another bedroom where he finds his 13-year-old sister Allison. He raises his rifle and he fires 1 shot. He leaves her room, he goes up the 3rd set of stairs up onto the 3rd floor. He finds his 18-year-old sister Dawn and he fires 1 shot into her, and then he was done. Altogether, it took Ron about 15 minutes to massacre his family. At no point was he panicked or running around or acting crazy. He was just walking calmly room to room, taking very well-aimed shots to ensure they didn't get up again. He put the rifle down and he went outside and he jogged to a bar where he went inside and he put on this big facade that he had just found his family and they were hurt and could you come help him? And when they got to the house, he refused to go inside, but the people from the bar went inside and they discovered this horrible scene. And when the police show up, Ron goes over to them and he actually confesses and says, "I killed my family." Even though the DeFeo family had a reputation for being very dysfunctional, it was Ron who had the worst reputation. He was known around Amityville for heavy drug use, for being a total reputation. He was known around Amityville for heavy drug use, for being a total alcoholic, and for getting really aggressive and confrontational with people. He was just a guy no one wanted to be around. And so when news got out in Amityville that this horrible thing has happened and it looks like Ron is the one who did it, no one was really that shocked. But when details of the crime scene, specifically the way the bodies were positioned, made people wonder, is there more to this case that we don't know about? All of the DeFeo family members had been found lying face down in their beds, and none of them showed any signs of putting up a struggle against their attacker, which led investigators initially to think that they must have been sedated, that Ron must have drugged them somehow before he carried out this attack. But when the toxicology reports came back, no one in the family had any substance in their system. At first, the police did not think that was a very big deal. They figured, you know what? The family just must not have heard the different gunshots. He wasn't shooting lots of rounds. It was, 1 single round here, 1 single round here, that perhaps they just didn't hear it, and that's why no one tried to escape. But it turns out the rifle Ron was using, the .35 caliber Marlin, is one of the loudest rifles you can own. And in fact, investigators went out and did a test with it, and they fired it indoors, and you could easily hear it a mile away. And so investigators said, well, then it looks like they must have heard these gunshots, but for some reason didn't get out of their beds. They didn't try to fight back in any way. They just kind of took it. And then you have the weirdness of Ron's confession. On the night of the attack, when Ron is sitting on his bed and he can't sleep and everybody else is asleep upstairs, he starts hearing a voice in his head that's saying, "Catch them, kill them." And he thinks he's just losing his mind. But then out of the shadows, straight across from him, from underneath the steps in the basement, this shadowy figure emerges and starts walking towards him, and he can see what looks like its mouth moving and saying the words, "Catch them, kill them." And Ron's looking up at it as this figure walks all the way up to him and bends down and gets right next to his ear, and he says right into his ear, "Catch them, kill them." And then Ron said involuntarily he reached over to the rifle that was on the bed with him, and he stood up and he began walking towards the steps, and he knew what was going to happen. He was going to go kill his family, and he didn't want to do it, but he felt like he didn't have any more control over his body, and that's when he realized he was being possessed by this demon in the basement. While Ron's confession terrified everybody in Amityville, the idea that there was a demon living in the basement of this house that possessed someone to go kill their family, I mean, that terrified everybody, but it didn't hold up in court, and ultimately Ron was sent to jail for life. 1 year after the attacks, another family, the Lutz family, moved into the house in Amityville, but they left 28 days later because they were hearing voices coming from the basement. After hearing about the mass murder that occurred in the house, and now the Lutz family saying that there's something in the basement, world-renowned demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren, they descend on the property, and very quickly Ed and Lorraine say, yes, this house is definitely haunted. And in fact, to this day, the Amityville house is considered one of the most haunted places in the entire world. But while Ed and Lorraine were there, they took a very famous picture. Lorraine was walking around the second floor near where the brothers' room was, and she was snapping pictures, and the only people in the house at the time these pictures were being taken were her and her husband, Ed. And here is the picture that she took on the second floor. She claims this boy standing on the left side of the picture is the ghost of John DeFeo. Today, the house still stands, and it's been bought and sold a number of times over the years because apparently no one likes to live in this house for a very long time. On June 10th, 1912, the Moore family was sleeping peacefully in their beds on their quiet street in Villisca, Iowa. Joe and Sarah Moore, the mother and the father, were asleep upstairs in their room, and their 4 children were down the hall in another room. In addition to the Moore family sleeping upstairs, there was also 2 more children sleeping on the first floor in the guest room. It was the Stillinger sisters, and they were over for a sleepover. And unbeknownst to all the sleeping people in the house, there was a strange man who had broken into the house while they were at church, gone into the attic, and was hiding in there smoking cigarettes and carrying an axe. Shortly after midnight, this stranger believed the coast was clear, and they silently opened up the small door, and they crouched down and walked out of the attic into the second floor hallway, wielding this axe in their left hand. They began walking down the hallway. They passed the children's room on their right, and they made their way down to the end of the hall where the master bedroom was. They walked inside the room and stood right next to Joe, and then violently raised the axe over their head, so quickly and so high that it actually struck the ceiling, and then brought it down blade first directly onto Joe's face, over and over and
Jesus.
over again until Joe did not resemble a human being. While this was happening right next to her, Sarah's beginning to stir and look around what's going on. Meanwhile, the killer has now moved to the other side of the bed and is standing over Sarah and using the backside of the axe. So not the blade part, but the backside of the axe head. He raises it up and then brings it down on her head and repeatedly hits her over and over and over again until she too is indistinguishable and does not look like herself or even human. The killer is very calm. He takes the sheets and pulls them up over the faces of both of the people he just killed, and then he goes back out into the hall and he walks down and he goes into the children's room. One by one, he raises the axe and drops the axe on each of the children's heads, and then after they are deceased, he pulls the sheets up over their head. The killer leaves the room and goes downstairs to where the Stillinger sisters are, and then just like everybody else in the house, he raises the axe and drops it over and over and over again on the heads of each of these girls until they're no longer living as well. Afterwards, he raises the sheets over their faces, and now everyone in the house is deceased and has their face covered. At this point, the killer goes back upstairs and goes back into the master bedroom, and he stands in front of Joe and Sarah's bed, and after a little while, he begins striking them dozens more times, even though both of them were clearly deceased at this point. At this point, the killer shifted gears and began focusing on covering his tracks, cleaning up. And he began taking clothes out of closets and pulling whatever sheets he hadn't used. He began tacking these things up onto all of the windows and any spaces on the doors so that nobody could see in. He also began covering up the mirrors, which no one understood why he did that. After the house is totally covered up, the killer goes into the kitchen and he cooks himself a meal, but he doesn't eat the food. He cleaned off the axe and placed it up against the wall on the first floor. He then took a huge bowl, filled it up with water, and then washed his bloody hands and began to clean himself a little bit, and then he left the bloody water just sitting on the counter. And then, strangely, he took a huge slab of bacon from in the kitchen and he put it in the middle of the floor, and then next to it was a keychain. And some people think this might have to do with some ritual he was performing, but to this day, no one really knows why he did that. And then he took some keys from inside the house, walked out the door, turned around, locked it behind him, and disappeared. The Moore household normally was a very rambunctious place with all these kids running around, and the neighbors were very close. And so the next morning, when the neighbors did not see...
Bro, I couldn't... Oh my God. Jesus Christ. Going to each one. Fuck.
The Moore family coming outside to do their chores around 7 a.m., they were concerned, and they went over and they knocked on the door.
Hey, Rachel D.
They noticed everything had sheets over it, so they couldn't see inside. And so Joe's brother was hailed to the house, and he brought along a key, and he opened up the door, and he walked inside, and he immediately saw the Stillinger sisters and what had been done to them, and he got incredibly sick, and he ran outside, and they called police. Police come down, and they find this horrible scene. Even though they have the murder weapon, they have the victims, their bodies are right here, there's blood, there's all sorts of...
Oh yeah, with the amount... I didn't even think of that. With the amount of chemicals, yeah. He could have been hallucinating. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Holy shit. Good one, SJB. Yeah, I would assume, like, you would definitely having a headache going. But yeah, he could be like dizzy and then start hallucinating.
Stuff and things that the killer must have manipulated, and you would think there's enough here that you'd be able to refine your search to a couple different suspects and eventually figure out who did this, but they weren't able to. And to this day, we have no idea who did this. The house itself where the attack happened has not been updated since the attack. Somebody bought the property and then maintained it so it could be a tourist attraction. And so to this day, you can go to the Villisca axe murder house and you can stay there. You can sleep there overnight and you can actually tour the area, and it looks the same way it did when the murders happened. Many people believe that house is haunted. And in fact, in 2014, someone who was there staying overnight as a tourist inexplicably stabbed themselves and had to go to the hospital, and they don't even know why they did it. And so that's kind of added to the legend of the Villisca axe murder house, that the house itself will cause you to harm yourself. So that's going to do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you found the secret in today's video, please tell us in the comments what it is and where you found it. And if you're the first to do that, we will pin you at the top of the comments section. If you enjoyed today's video and you haven't done this already, please invite the like button over to your house, and while they're sleeping, buzz a small square of their hair off. Also, please subscribe to this channel.
That poor like button over at Mr. Ball's channel takes a fucking blowhole beating. Oh, man. God damn, Mr. Ballin. All right, let's change it up a little bit. Let's do animal encounters. It usually doesn't end well on my channel, majority of the time. Let's do this one off of Final Afflictions channel. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, you just don't own a chimp. I don't know, people that, okay, I'm just going to say it. If you own a chimp or keep it as a pet, you are out of your fucking mind. Just saying. I just had to get it out there.
In today's episode, a newlywed couple adopt a pet chimp named Travis.
You will never convince me why a chimp will make a good pet for anyone. Ugh. It's just a never good outcome. There we go.
Later grew into a savage killer. After years of showing no signs of aggression or violence, one day Travis snapped, resulting in a terrifying and brutal attack on
See, look at this shit.
his owner. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the horrifying story of Travis the Killer Chimpanzee. Welcome to Final Affliction.
Yeah, no.
Jerome and Sandra Harold were a devoted couple who lived in Stamford, Connecticut. They were a lovely family with only one daughter named Susan. Susan was soon married, eloping with her husband, and the once lively and busy house was reduced to quietness. On October 24, 2003, the lonely couple got tired of the boredom and bought a 3-day-old chimp for $50,000. The chimp, whom they named Travis after Sandra's favorite country music star Travis Tritt, lived with the couple at their home. The couple bathed, bottle-fed, dressed, and even brushed Travis's teeth. They loved and adored the chimp, treating him as their own surrogate baby. He had brought a renewed sense of purpose and liveliness into the house, providing something to keep the couple busy following their daughter's departure. As Travis grew, he embraced the ways of his human parents, learning how to decipher their verbal and nonverbal language. The couple had to restructure their house to accommodate the fast-growing chimp. They created a huge room and hung swinging tires on ropes for Travis to play and roam. He was ever busy swinging and jumping on the couch and bed as the couple worked on other errands. At the dinner table, Travis had a seat and a stemmed wine glass. He took his meals with the family. The couple had really pampered him. Soon, everyone in Stamford knew him. Neighbors and the police held and waved at Travis whenever they saw him. His friendly nature won the residents' hearts.
Yeah, this is where you're going wrong. Right off the bat. Thinking it's a human. Oh my God.
And within no time, he was a local celebrity. He could dress himself, feed hay to the horses, open locked doors with a key.
See? That's a steel door!
As well as
oh my God. That they have
water
to
plants.
keep these fuckers
To him, technology was a curious feat that he strived to learn. His love for baseball had him mastering watching TV using the remote control. The chimp could also boot and log into the family computer and browse pictures. He had a weak spot for ice cream, which had him memorizing the days and times that the ice cream truck passed by the house. In 2003, the couple headed to town to replenish their supplies, carrying Travis in the back seat with his window partially open. They were stuck in traffic when a person walking past threw an empty soda can into the car, hitting Travis. Calmly, Travis unbuckled his seatbelt, unlocked the car door, and chased after the culprit. However, Travis didn't catch up with him. He then knuckle-walked to the tarmac, lay on his stomach, and started rolling, bringing the traffic to a halt. The traffic officers had to call for backup, as the drivers and other locals were treated to a humorous chase. Travis smiled as he skidded and jumped over cars, evading the over a dozen police officers after him. The chase went on for almost 2 hours before a tired Travis finally walked himself back into the car and buckled his seatbelt. This incident led to the Connecticut authorities passing a law that ordered no resident to own a pet primate weighing more than 50 pounds. Travis was luckily exempted from the rule because the Heralds had owned him for long and the authorities believed he posed no risk.
Good God, this chimp got up to like 200 some plus pounds, if I remember correctly.
Unfortunately, in 2004, a year after this incident, Jerome Harold lost his battle with stomach cancer. This left Sandra and Travis, who saw Jerome as his alpha, deeply devastated. The home was once again covered by a cloud of sadness as Sandra...
Look at him. Look at the size of that guy.
The home was once again...
Look at the size of this.
...covered by a cloud of sadness as Sandra was down in the dumps. However, that wasn't the only pressing issue, as soon enough, officers from the Stamford Animal Control Department started knocking at her door. The officers were concerned for Sandra's safety. With Travis transitioning into early childhood, he had now amassed enough strength to equal 5 muscular men. He was prone to...
Hey, MC Sleeves, nice for you to show, boy.
...aggression.
I hope so.
Especially during his adolescence, which meant he would be hard and harmful for Sandra to control. The animal control officers advised Sandra that keeping the chimp in the coming years was
Look at the size of that. Oh my God, that's terrifying.
impractical. Having never shown any signs of aggression or violence, Sandra was not worried. With grief over her
should've.
gone husband gripping her like a vice, Sandra sunk into depression, halting all her social activities and communication. She spent days sitting and rocking back and forth on her chair by their yard as she watched the sunsets. Her unstable and vulnerable condition had profound effects on Travis, who spent his days eating snacks as he watched TV. He never left the house, and with little to no physical activity, Travis found himself ghastly obese at 240 pounds.
Good fucking God, 240 pounds.
His once shiny face had turned black, full of wrinkles. His chest had shifted from sturdy to flabby as hair loss took over. On Sunday, February the 15th, 2009, Sandra picked up her phone and rang her close friend Charla Nash, inviting her for a lively chat. Sandra and Charla had been friends for years, and she was a frequent visitor to the Herald's house. Travis knew Charla, having seen her uncountable times. After catching up, the two left Travis alone and headed to Mohegan Sun Casino. They began with the salon and had their hair made before heading for dinner. Afterwards, the duo enjoyed gambling before heading home. On setting foot into the house, an eerie feeling stirred Sandra differently. She noticed that Travis was uninterested in his favorite ice cream. The TV and computer were off, which was odd, considering how much Travis loved his shows. Sandra mixed Xanax with the chimp's tea before retiring to bed.
Excuse me?
Sandra mixed Xanax with the chimp's tea before retiring to bed. The next morning, February 16th, 2009, Sandra woke up to find Travis aimlessly romping in the yard. She tried calling him back into the house, but he ignored. Something was off. She immediately rang Charla and informed her of Travis's behavior. Without hesitation, Charla got into her car and sped to Sandra.
This is what Lord evolved to.
Sandra's home to help her get Travis back into the house. She alighted and picked Travis's favorite toy, a red Tickle Me Elmo, that she hoped was a good bait to lure Travis back into the house.
Oh, God.
The duo, feeling confident in their ability to handle Travis, headed out to the yard. But on seeing his favorite toy, Travis snapped. As if driven by a fierce possessiveness over his favorite toy, Travis lunged forward, throwing Charla to the ground. He then stood over her, and using his massive jaws, he sunk his teeth into her face. As Travis's jaws clamped, Charla let out a chilling scream that echoed through the neighborhood. Travis ripped off her lips and nose and
Oh my God.
tore her eyelids. Travis ripped off her lips and nose and tore her eyelids. Sandra quickly grabbed a shovel and hit Travis several times, but he was unstoppable. He continued biting and attacking Charla, completely crashing her facial structure. Sandra dashed back to the house, grabbed a
Hey, thank God, join the club. This is what I used to listen to when I used to fall asleep to shit like this. Not creepy or anything.
kitchen knife and stormed back out to help her friend. Travis was so engrossed in the rampage
I don't actually fall asleep to true crime stuff.
that he didn't
Or to Lauren.
notice Sandra approaching him. With all her might, Sandra plunged the knife into the chimp's back and took a step back. Travis stopped mauling Charla and turned, glaring at Sandra with his eyes wild with rage. He then turned to Charla and continued mauling her as if nothing had happened. Charla could hear the sounds of her own bones snapping as Travis bit off her left hand. She shouted at him, "Travis, stop, stop!" But Travis was in a frenzy. Seeing the ferocity of Travis and foreseeing that she was going to be next, Sandra got into her car and locked all the doors. Her hands were shaking with fear and her heart pounding in her chest as she fumbled for her phone and called 911.
What's the problem?
Police! Send the police!
What's the problem there?
The chip killed my friend!
What's the problem with your friend?
Oh, please!
What's the problem with your friend? I need to know.
Send the police up! With a gun! With a gun! He ripped her face off!
He ripped her face off?
He's trying to attack me! Please,
Okay,
hurry!
I need you to calm down a little bit. They're on the way. Can you put yourself away? I don't want the monkey attacking you.
Please, hurry up! Listen to me!
They're on the way, ma'am.
Guns! They gotta shoot him, please! Please, hurry!
Are you there with your friend? I need you to help your friend. Can you go help your friend?
I can't! He tried to attack me now!
Is he still there with your friend?
Yes,
Okay, so then back off. Then don't get any closer, okay? They're already on the way.
please.
If the monkey moves away from your friend, let me know, okay? So we can try to help your friend.
No, I can't. She's dead. She's dead.
Why are you saying that she's dead?
She's dead. He ripped her apart.
He ripped what apart? Her face?
Everything.
He ripped her apart?
I think I'm gonna faint. I think I'm gonna pass out.
No, just breathe, okay? I'm gonna stay with you on the phone until they get there.
Listen to me. Please hurry. Please hurry.
Oh my God. This is hard to listen to right now.
Oh my God.
Sandra felt like her heart was in her throat as she watched Charla lie unconscious. Officer Frank Chiafari, who was the first to respond to the 911 call, found Travis roaming in the yard as Charla lay unconscious with her tattered clothes covered in her own blood. The enraged Travis then circled the police car, looking for an open door. Inside, Officer Frank was scared to death as the 240-pound chimp smashed the passenger window and unlocked the door. The officer fired 4 shots at Travis. The injured
He didn't rip her apart, but her face is no longer, though.
chimp
She survived. She survived, but there's no face.
stumbled into the house, got on his bed, and took his last breath. In the following months, Charla underwent multiple surgeries to restore her distorted face. Her left hand had been mauled, as well as 3 fingers on her
Yeah.
right hand. Her injuries were so severe that the medical team under her care had to undergo counseling because of the trauma of tending to her. The toxicology report on Travis revealed that he had been dosed with Xanax, which may have fueled his aggression. Others argued that Charla had changed her hair color and curls, making her unrecognizable as she held Travis's favorite doll, which spooked him. No matter what caused Travis to attack,
It does no matter what happened. Fucking ripped her face off. Oh, dude, just to see herself like that now would be traumatizing, yeah, on itself. Now you're just making it tempting, Dacon. Mr. Billy the Kid showed up here. Nice for everyone stopping by. Cat, stop. I'm biting my freaking feet. Let's see. Let's get a little creepy.
There is a house in Gary,
Right here.
Indiana that has been dubbed the Demon House. Now, if you were to walk past this house on the street, it wouldn't stand out to you. It's very modest, single-story, 3-bedroom home. Looks like all the other houses around it. But the history...
I thought it was supposed to chill you out, Xanax, but maybe the withdrawal, because obviously he must have been getting it. If he was getting daily amounts of Xanax, I wonder if withdrawals, maybe, or I don't know, but he was getting daily amounts of it though, like every night, maybe if he was getting it, and I don't know. We're just gonna say maybe he just was withdrawing, maybe, and then went crazy, possibly.
Behind this house is totally bizarre. Latoya Ammons, who was a mother of 3 that lived inside of this house with her 3 kids, she began to report to the police that demons were throwing her children against the wall. Now, when police got the report that children are being thrown against the wall, their first thought is, you're an unfit parent. And so they sent Child Protective Services and the police to go check out this residence and make sure that she really was a competent parent. They are shocked at what they find. And what they find is documented in a police report. And courtesy of the executive producer of 317 Films, Christopher Geizot, I have a copy of said police report, and when I read through this thing for the first time, I literally wrote him an email and said, this is fake. There's no way this is an actual police report. And he said, no, that's real. It's from the Lake County Sheriff's Department. It is the official police report, and it's mind-blowing. Today, I'm gonna tell the story of what happened when the police got involved, and I'm just going to use information that was in the police report. But before we get into today's crazy story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right channel, because that's all I do, and I upload 3 to 4.
I was just thinking that too, because, yeah, human meds aren't, yeah, you nailed it, Mandy, yes.
Or even 5 times every week. And so if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to gently take the like button out for a nice seafood dinner.
Oh, yeah,
and
it's a
never call it
benzo.
again. That's so weird.
What?
Encourage you to gently take the like button out for a nice seafood dinner and never call it again. That's so weird. And also sub to my channel and turn on all notifications
Oh my
so you don't
God.
miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into
Like, just ghosted.
the story.
Let's watch this.
After numerous reports that Latoya Ammons was mistreating her children, based on reports that she gave, she was telling police that demons were throwing her kids around the house. Based on those reports, Child Protective Services was sent to do a
Immediately.
home study, to go to their house, go to Latoya Ammons' house, and make sure it was a safe, clean place for children to be living. In addition to the case manager, her
This is a good story. It's very freaky.
name was Valerie Washington, who was going to be going over to do this home study. The Lake County Sheriff Department also sent over Lieutenant Gruszka, who would be assisting Valerie and watching the home study take place. When Gruszka arrives at the house, he is met with Valerie Washington, also Latoya Ammons, the mother, and her 2 sons, Andrew, who's 9, and Amante, who's 7, as well as Latoya's mother, so the boy's grandmother. Her name was Rosa. Washington, the case manager, pulls Gruszka aside out of earshot of Latoya and her family, and she starts telling Gruszka about what happened at the hospital 8 days earlier, because she, the case manager, had already begun investigating Latoya Ammons and that whole situation with her kids. 8 days earlier, Washington was at the hospital, sitting in a waiting room. Washington was with a psychologist, and they were speaking to Rosa, who was the grandmother of these children. In the room was also Andrew, the oldest son, and Amante, the youngest son. And as they're chatting, Amante, the youngest son, stands up and walks to the middle of the waiting room. And his eyes roll back into his skull, and he begins emitting this growling sound that sounded too deep for a boy of 7 years old. The grandmother reacted to it like she had seen it before. She got right up, she marched over to him, and she took him by the
We'll get one, tomorrow. For sure. Yeah. We'll get back to Lauren. I do 2 days of doing this stuff, Mr. Ball and stuff. Like creepy stories and stuff on Tuesdays and Fridays.
hands, and she yelled, "You are not you." And she kept saying that, and the boy's eyes are still back in his head, and he's not responding to anything his grandmother's saying. As Rosa is repeating over and over again, "You are not you," Amante begins backpedaling. towards a wall behind him. And Rosa holds his hands the whole time. She's holding his hands firmly. He gets to the wall, and instead of stopping, he puts his foot up against the wall. This is a 7-year-old boy, and begins walking up the wall by pressing against Rosa. And she's holding on tight, and he's pressing back at her and using that weight to walk backwards up the wall. The psychologists in Washington are just watching in disbelief. Rosa
Just imagine.
up the wall. The psychologists in Washington are just watching in disbelief. Rosa's holding on to him as he walks all the way up to where he's on his tippy toes on the wall. And then he flips forward in front of her and lands on his feet on the other side of Rosa. The psychologist in Washington literally run out of the room, and they go.
And nice for you to stop by, Mr. Pine Bear and Patriot. Thanks for stopping by.
Get a doctor, and they explain what happened. The doctor comes in, not having any clue what to make of this, and just says to the boy, "Can you do that again?" And Amante at this point, his eyes are back to normal, and he's sitting now next to Rosa, and he says, "What? I didn't do anything," and acted like he had not been walking up the walls. Now, it's not in the report how Lieutenant Gruszka responds to Washington's story about the hospital. However, the entire police report that I'm pulling all this information from is written by Lieutenant Gruszka at the end of the investigation. So this exchange between he and the case manager, Washington, about the hospital visit that he was not part of, it apparently carried weight in the entire investigation that he felt compelled to add it into the report. Even though on paper, you would think if you're doing a home study for this house, why would you incorporate something that didn't have anything to do with the house? It gives you maybe an insight into Lieutenant Gruszka, although his language remains super professional and very pragmatic, that perhaps Lieutenant Gruszka at the end of this investigation was starting to think this might be paranormal. After this story, 2 more police officers show up to the house to assist with this home study. One was Brian Miller and the other was Charles Austin. At this point, the 3 officers, Gruszka, Miller, and Austin, along with the case manager, Washington, begin walking towards the family and towards the front door of the house. LaToya says that she and her kids will
5-finger death punch.
not go back in the house because they had moved out very recently because of the strangeness that they claim was happening inside of the house. They felt like they were under attack by
Hey, buddy, nice for you to stop by.
demons. And so the police, they needed someone to bring them in.
I'll be seeing 5-finger death punch November 5th when they're with Metallica.
And so Rosa, the grandmother, LaToya's mother, she offered to go in with them. So the house is a single-story, 3-bedroom house. You walk in and you're inside of the screened-in porch. You go in
First day is going to be Metallica Pantera. Can't wait.
the main level. There's a few bedrooms, and then there's a stairwell that leads down into the basement. And so they go in, and Lieutenant Gruszka is in charge of taking pictures and recording audio the whole time they're in the house. They were not aware that they had already moved out. So it's a bit of an awkward home study because they're not even living there anymore. But either way, they're going to do their job.
5-finger
They're walking
fillet,
around,
Jesus
taking
Christ,
pictures of each of the
majestic.
bedrooms. There's 3 bedrooms. There's a kitchen, basic
Jesus Christ, I feel like a fucking idiot just now. 5-finger fillet. Oh my god, I was thinking 5-finger death
stuff
punch.
upstairs, and then they go downstairs.
The
to
band.
basement. Now, the basement
Fucking hell.
is where LaToya
feel like
and
an
her
idiot.
family claimed the majority of the
Wood 87.
paranormal activity was taking place. The steps leading down to the basement were wood. They went down into the basement.
In
The
full
basement floor
87.
was concrete, and the walls were concrete blocks. As they go down, Lieutenant Gruszka would notice that there were candles that had been placed all over the basement floor that had burned down to their wick. There was also an altar and a nativity scene that had been placed near the underside of the stairs. And so when Gruszka goes over to take pictures of the altar and the nativity scene, he recognizes that under the stairs, near where those 2 things are placed, it's all dirt. The concrete that made up the floor of the basement had been broken away, and there was jagged pieces of concrete where there should have been a continuous flow of concrete underneath the steps. It had been snapped up and broken away. It was gone. When Rosa was questioned about the strangeness of the basement with all the candles and the altar, she just said that there's a presence down here, and that's all she was able to articulate. The other officers and the case manager and Rosa, they go back upstairs, And Lieutenant Gruzka and Charles Austin, the other officer, they stay in the basement and take a few extra pictures, a couple more underneath the stairs.
Hey, Miss Guru. Nice for you to stop by.
And just of the candles before they ultimately go upstairs as well. When Gruzka comes upstairs, Rosa's waiting for him, and she's about to turn the light off leading down into the basement. And she asks him, "Did you get any pictures underneath the stairs?" And he said, yeah, I did. I stayed down there and I took some more pictures. She looks at him and she says, "Sometimes at night when we're sleeping on the main floor, we'll hear commotion in the basement. It sounds like maybe someone bumping on the underside of the stairs. And then you hear footsteps walking up the wood steps. And whatever it is stops on the other side of the door leading into the main floor, and it will stay there for hours. We're too scared to open the door to look." Gruzka goes back to his office and he immediately uploads the pictures that he took with a focus on the ones he took in the basement. And he finds that there is a couple pictures he took under the stairs, that in the right-hand corner of the picture, just behind one of the steps, it's partially obscured, is a white mist or a white cloud. And he zooms in on it and he brings in other officers and they look at it, and if you zoom in close enough, it looks like a man's face. As they're zoomed in on this mist underneath the stairs, they can see, only because they've zoomed in, that there appears to be a faint green mist on the left side of the picture. Appears to be a woman's face. Gruzka and Austin, who were the only two in the basement at the time of these pictures taken, swear they did not see a white or green mist under the stairs when they took pictures. Gruzka, again, it doesn't say in the report how he's feeling, but you can imagine he's starting to feel a little bit uneasy about what he's witnessing. Gruzka just goes to his audio recording. And so he fast forwards to the section where he and Austin are alone in the basement taking these additional photos. And you can clearly hear on the recording Gruzka and Austin talking to each other as they're taking these pictures. And at some point, as they're taking these pictures of the basement, a third voice, not Austin, not Gruzka, say directly into the audio recorder, "Hey." The audio recorder was one that Gruzka was used to using, and it had never malfunctioned before. And he and Austin were the only ones down there. And so they couldn't explain where the third voice was coming from, and neither could any of the other officers who listened to it. On April 30th, Gruzka set up a meeting with Latoya Ammon's priest, who she was very close with. They were regular churchgoers. This priest, his name was Father Maginot, he had been at the Ammon's residence 5 days before this home visit was done, when Latoya Ammons and her family was still living in that residence. And so Gruzka went to interview him to get a sense of what it was like when they were still living there. Father Maginot said he was there because Latoya had reached out and said, "I don't know what to do," because she's claiming there are demons here. And while they're sitting in the living room on the main floor, Father Maginot is telling Gruzka that the bathroom light started flickering on and off. And so it was distracting enough that ultimately Father Maginot got up and walked over to the bathroom, and as soon as he went inside, the flickering stopped. And then he'd go back down and sit down, and it would start again. Repeatedly, Father Maginot would get up when it was flickering, he would go in and it would stop.
Man, that's creepy.
He'd come back and it would start flickering again. So while this is happening and Father Maginot is going back and forth to the bathroom trying to figure out why the light is flickering, Latoya points out that a liquid is forming on one of the window blinds in the room that they were all sitting in. There was this oily liquid substance that was just kind of trickling down the window blinds. And Father Maginot walks over and looks at it. They're all looking at it, and there's no leak in the ceiling. There's no source for this liquid, and it hadn't been there before. At least that's what Latoya Ammons and her family is saying, that that's not from us. We don't know what that is. As they're looking at this oily substance on the blinds, the cord that controls the blind itself starts swaying back and forth. And everyone's startled as they're looking at it because there's no draft in the room. The window's not open. There's no reason it should be swaying. While they're looking at this cord, Father Maginot looks down and sees this huge footprint in the carpet near where they're standing.
Oh shit.
That was too big to be his,
Cat,
and nobody else in the house had a footprint that was that big. At this point, Father Maginot doesn't think it's safe for the family to be there.
Good girl.
And advises her to leave. And this would actually be the episode that prompts Latoya Ammons and her family to leave the house and not come back. On May 10th, Lieutenant
This demon's being a troll right now.
Gruzka, a new Child Protective Services case manager, and a host of police officers go back to the Ammons residence. The Ammons residence has been unoccupied with all utilities shut off, locked and sealed since the last time they were there, which was on April 27th. So it's a 2-week period that no one has been in the house. But there is a customary follow-up to this house. They had to as part of the home study. When Lieutenant Gruszka arrives at the property, outside is Father Maginot, as well as Latoya Ammons, her mother, Rosa, Latoya's 2 sons, Andrew and Amante, as well as a host of police officers. There's a canine unit that's there. Although it's not said explicitly in the report, it would appear that the reason there's all this additional police presence in a canine unit is because there's enough weirdness being reported about the house. There could be, a home invasion situation happening, that somebody else is living in this house. Any number of things could be happening, but they can't write off all of the strange testimony about what's happening in the house. And so before they go in for this second home study, they have one of the dogs from the canine unit go into the property and search the property for intruders, just in case this was a home invasion or something like that. They wanted to just check the box. So they send the dog in, the dog comes out, hasn't found anything unusual. And so the police, along with Father Maginot, the case manager, and Rosa, they go back into the house. The main level looked untouched. There was nothing strange happening in the main level when they walked around. Nothing was disturbed. It looked like no one had been here in 2 weeks. So they open the door to the basement, they turn on the light, and a couple weird things happen right away. One, they notice that on the steps, on the wooden steps leading into the basement, there is an oily substance with no clear origin that goes all the way down the steps, snakes around the side, and disappears underneath the stairs. As they begin walking down the stairs, the case manager from Child Protective Services happens to touch a cabinet that had been built into the walls along the stairwell leading down into the basement. And immediately she pulls her hand back. She grabs her pinky and she reacts like something had hurt her. And they ask, "Hey, what's going on?" And she's like, "I don't know, I just touched the cabinet and my hand now hurts. My pinky hurts, it's tingling." And it apparently had turned white. We don't have any images to show that, but her pinky basically had been wounded just from touching this cabinet. And so the officers go down into the basement, they follow this oily trail that goes back under the stairs, and they're thinking to themselves, all the utilities have been turned off. There's no reason there should be any water down here. Not to mention there's no origin for this oily substance. And no one's been in the house for the past 2 weeks.
I'm always watching.
So we can't even account for this by saying that one of the family members might have spilled something. And so even though it's not written into the report that they were scared or that they were considering this could be beyond rational explanation, it's clear from what happens next that everybody there was...
I was about to say, Guru, we have, I've been wanting to go on a ghost hunting, not really ghost hunting, but there's a ghost hunting, like a ghost tour at the Missouri State Penitentiary, and it's supposed to be fucking amazing.
Ready to explore the idea that something was happening underneath.
You should go.
Steps, because now the family's claimed there's been something crawling out of there and walking up the stairs at night. You have this strange oily substance coming from the underside of the stairs. You have the white and the green apparition inside of the pictures. Father Maginot suggested that if there was some sort of demonic possession happening in the house, that there's a good chance they would find things underneath the steps that were tied to the family. And so they decide they're going to dig up the dirt underneath the steps. And so Gruszka begins digging into this dirt patch under the steps. And he makes it about 2 feet down. And he finds a press-on pink fingernail. He also finds women's underwear. And as he keeps digging, he finds a political pin, like for your t-shirt. He also finds the lid to one of the cooking pots from upstairs. He continues to dig and he finds some trash and miscellaneous papers. And it dawns on the group that someone or something is...
I really want to go to the Missouri State Penitentiary. I've been there before, but I haven't been to the ghost hunting. Not the ghost hunting, but like the ghost tour. Missouri State Penitentiary, if you haven't looked it up, it's a fucking creepy fucking prison. It's a big one too. Also, my other one I want to go on is the Eastern State the Eastern State Penitentiary. Out in It's supposed to be that one's supposed to be like extremely haunted. So I've been always wanting to do stuff like that. Sounds like a lot of fun. I like creepy shit like that. And also I like getting scared. I like this shit, but my body hates it physically. like I love it, but like I also hate it, if you know what I mean. Because like I love it, but my body hates it.
Leaving the basement,
No,
going into the main
cat.
section of the house, taking things from the family, going back downstairs, going underneath the steps, and burying them. And probably
Yeah, watch that fucking bug, Doc.
has been for some time. And so at some point, they stopped being able to dig any farther. The soil was too hard, so they put the soil back and decide to leave the house. As they're leaving the house, Rosa is the last one to leave, and she actually says, "Hey, come over here." And she's standing in that screened-in porch, and she's looking up at the window blinds.
I know, we're mortal enemies, Guru.
On the window blinds in the house is that same, or it appeared to be the same, oily substance trickling down the blinds that matched the description of what Father Maginot had said he had seen when he was visiting the family before and saw liquid coming down the blinds. And so the officers reacted to this by saying, "Rosa, did you do this? Are you responsible for putting this liquid on the blinds?" And she said no. There was no clear source for this liquid. There was no leak. There was nothing. And so Lieutenant Ruska wipes the liquid off of the blinds and tells everyone to leave the house.
Dude, I would also love to do like a ghost tour of an asylum. There it is.
For 25 minutes, they waited, and then they went back inside to see if there was going to be liquid there, and there was. And Father Maginot would say that after that first time he was there and he saw the liquid dripping down, he did some research, and it's very common over the history of time that if there's any sort of demonic possession in a house, that liquids will ooze from different areas in the house. And it's this oily substance that matches the description of what they just saw. At this point, Lieutenant Gruska and the police tell everyone to vacate the premise, they lock it up, and they leave. And that is the end of the police report. Although not included in this police report, where I pulled all of the story from, Charles Austin, who was the other officer who was in the basement with Lieutenant Gruska when they were taking pictures underneath the steps and they heard that voice on the recorder. Well, Charles Austin actually worked for another police department, the Hammond Police Department, and he took some pictures of the outside of this house during the time that no one was staying at the house. And one of the official police pictures shows a shadowy figure standing in the screened-in porch.
Look at that. Look at that shit. Yeah, you can see the neck. Dude, that's a good full body apparition right there. Now look at that big word majestic that's blew out of his mouth. Right out of the blowhole of fucking Falkor. Look at that. Yeah, look at that. Fucking neck, head. Got the shoulder. Got like, what is that? Got like an arm right here. See? Going down right there. I believe. And you got some legs. And we got a full body apparition, ladies and gentlemen, right here.
Of this house, right
Holy
near where
shit.
that liquid was dripping down the blinds. In 2014, Zach Bagans, who's a popular paranormal investigator, he hosts the show Ghost Adventures. He purchased the Demon House and filmed a documentary that he called The Demon House, and you can check that out for yourself. And he demolished the
Good night, Guru.
house in 2016. So
Thanks for stopping by.
I'd love to get your opinion on this story because I told it based on information that was available in official police documentation. Now, that doesn't mean that it was paranormal, that this house was haunted, that there were demons there, but it at least makes you wonder what was really happening in that house. If you enjoyed this story, then please, if you would, kindly take the like button out
Dark.
for a nice seafood dinner and then never call it again. and then subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly 3 to 4, even 5 video uploads that sound an awful lot like what you just heard.
God damn
If you
it.
want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram. My
You
handle is
stupid fuck.
JohnBallin416. I'm also very active on TikTok, where my handle is Mr. Ballin. So whether I see you on TikTok,
I love it. We gotta do this one now. They have to do this one. Where's my favorite animal? Right here. One of my
If safe
favorites.
was all I
Jesus. This is off of Fierce's channel. This is a crocodile attack. He's like yanked out of a freaking kayak. There you go.
wanted, I would have stayed
I'll be
home.
right back.
This is the nature of the beast, risk. That's what South African outdoorsman and author Hendrik Coetzee wrote on his blog during his pioneering kayak expedition into the Congo. Coetzee wasn't an ordinary man. He was an adventurer through and through. And he knew very well things don't always end up picture perfect for people like him. While leading his first of its kind kayaking expedition, Coetzee was snatched by a huge crocodile and dragged into the river, never to be seen again. This is his story. This is fierce. Hendrik Coetzee was a big name in the adventure community. He was born in 1975 in South Africa, and in 2010, at 35 years old, Coetzee had already garnered quite the reputation for himself. Coetzee first gained recognition back in 2004 when he led a Nile River source-to-sea expedition. This first noteworthy expedition was inspired by John Goddard, the first person to navigate the entire
You want the blowhole again, SJB? Give me a second.
length of the Nile River in a kayak. Coetzee's first expedition took 4 months, but it was a controversial one. Several claims that the expedition had not begun from the true source of the Nile determined Coetzee to prove his critics wrong. In April 2005, he commenced a second leg of the expedition, a further journey from Kagera to Lake
Hang on 1
Victoria.
second, I'll find it.
With over 4,600 miles completed,
Where you
Coetzee's
find it
first
again?
expedition was finally over and a resounding success. It was December 7, 2010, and Hendrik Coetzee was leading a groundbreaking whitewater kayaking expedition from the headwaters of the White Nile and Congo rivers into the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He was joined by 32-year-old Ben Stooksbury and 24-year-old Chris Corbulic, two world-class kayakers with extensive experience. Stooksbury and Corbulic were also dedicated explorers. With primary sponsorship from Eddie Bauer Incorporated's first ascent line of outdoor gear, the three men had started their trip a few weeks before. Their purpose was clear: document the whitewater of the White Nile and Congo and development projects in the region, bring attention to the horrible clean water crisis affecting millions in the region, and of course, be the first to boat the whitewater of the Lukuga River. Hendrik Coetzee had a bit of an agenda himself. He wanted to show Stooksbury and Corbulic the beauties of the region. He wanted to take them from the snow-capped peaks into the deepest, darkest...
You know what? Just because you asked nicely, SJB, I'll give you blowhole. Actually. Right now. I'll give you the blowhole. I'll give you the great almighty blowhole after this.
steamiest jungle. And he wanted to show them Western media had it all wrong. This wasn't one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Instead, it was a place of immense beauty, with nice, hospitable people and breathtaking nature. The Lukuga is a tributary of the Lualaba River in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a largely unexplored river, teeming with wildlife. Hippos and crocodiles are a normal sight on the river, and Coetzee was very well aware of this. He had made sure to warn Stooksbury and Corbulic about the possible dangers of the expedition. Coetzee, who was familiar with the region, had instructed them to steer clear from eddies if they didn't want to encounter dangerous hippos wallowing underwater. Banks were also to be avoided because crocs would often sunbathe on them. Moreover, he taught his team to tap their boats to make noise. As a further precaution, the men decided to always paddle close together, in a formation that made them appear as a large animal to any potential predators. December 7, 2010 started out with a bit of an adventure on the Lukuga River. The three adventurers had just finished what was generally considered the unnavigable portion of the river. Nobody had ever made it across the portion in no sort of boat. Nobody except them. They had paddled more than 30 miles of whitewater. By then, Stooksbury and Korbulik were confident in their skills and more than used to their surroundings. The three little crocodiles they had seen on the water that day, all of them just 3 feet long, didn't scare the men. They were in formation, safe and victorious. After navigating the last stretch of the rapids, Kutse, Stooksbury, and Korbulik faced 100 miles of flat water, a nice calm change of pace. They were in the middle of a stretch about 100 feet wide.
And that guy got in that fucking whirlpool right there a little bit.
Nice calm change of pace. They were in the middle of a stretch about 100 feet wide, paddling full pace in tight formation. There was thick elephant grass along the side, and the scenery was astounding. Kutse was in the middle of the formation, with Stooksbury a little in front to his left, and Korbulik a little behind to his right. Every now and then, when they got out of sync, their paddle blades would touch. At one point, as they paddled, Korbulik glanced over to make sure they weren't paddling away or towards each other. That's when he saw it. It all happened in an instant. A huge crocodile, a terrifying creature, shot out of the water, opened its massive jaws, and clamped down on Henry Kotse's left shoulder. The animal's jaws were as big as the man's entire torso.
Yeah, no shit, being safer in the rapids.
There wasn't enough time to act. There wasn't enough time to do anything at all. Kotse himself could do little else than shout, "Oh my God," before the animal pulled him under the water. His kayak was almost completely submerged. The overturned boat shook for about 20 seconds as the crocodile pulled Kotse from the cockpit. Just like that, in the blink of an eye, Henry Kotse was gone, never to be seen again. Several dread-filled minutes passed. Stooksbury and Korbulik watched in silence, too stunned to move. Then the two men snapped out of their daze. They figured the animal could come back, and they knew there was nothing they could do to protect themselves if they just waited around. They had to get out of the river, and fast. The two men paddled about a mile downstream to a nearby village. As they were talking to the locals, trying their best to explain what happened, they saw Henry's boat floating downstream. Stooksbury and Korbulik went after the kayak, just in case. But there was no sign to be found about Henry's struggle. Once they returned to the village, the two men tried to convince the villagers to help them look for Henry, but the villagers refused. They knew better. Henry Kotse was truly gone, and he wasn't the only one. This particular crocodile, a 15-foot, 2-ton beast, had already claimed the lives of 9 people. Ben Stooksbury and Chris Korbulik were devastated. They'd spent 7 weeks with Kotse, and they both agreed this had been the strongest team they've ever been a part of. The men were evacuated by the International Rescue Committee, and now they had to make their peace. It was certainly one of the most terrifying, hurtful experiences of their lives, but at the same time, the expedition had been enlightening. Ben Stooksbury later recounted, "The unfortunate thing is the night before this happened was one of the most beautiful nights of my life. It had rained, and we were all pretty happy to get cooled off by the rain. We all huddled up under the tarp on a beach, and were all smiles and super happy with each other. We were overwhelmed by the place. To say that Croc came out of the blue is both literal and figurative. He took us at our happiest." The village where the two men stopped after the incident put out a small reward for any news or clues regarding Henry Kotse, but nothing was ever found, not even a small piece of clothing. A memorial service for Kotse was held on 28 January 2011. The only things he had were books. He didn't even own a bicycle. He never left anything behind. Wherever he went, he just showed a bit of who he was. He was always so humble, and never spoke about his expeditions or accolades or achievements. He was just Hendrik. He was such a special son, and I had such a special relationship with him. He was just awesome, said Marie Niemann, Hendry's mother. Hendry Coetzee is still remembered as one of the greatest river explorers in recent history.
All right. Wow. Interesting. Well then. Bullshit. Love it. Bunch of bullshit. Just taken out by the CIA. There it is. Hey, Kingpin, nice for you to show by. Yeah, see, they're like fucking white people. Like goddamn white people again. Oh man. Good God. All right. Let's listen to another Mr. Ballin one. It's called the Tube Sock Killer.
If you live in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, then you want to pay close attention to the ending of today's video. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please ask the like button to go for a walk with you in northeastern Australia and push them into a gimpy plant. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story. In 1980,
Thank you. Thank you, SJB. Thank you. God damn it. Thank you for reminding me. Yes. Yes, we're doing that. Yes, we're doing blowhole time. I need the blowhole. The great, almighty blowhole. Why? This is why.
I didn't think
This is why we love the blowhole, ladies and gentlemen. We're gonna watch this entire one.
there was anything more claustrophobia-inducing and terrifying than being trapped in an underwater cave. That is, until I discovered today's top story. But before we get
And SJB, it's the top story of the day, too. The blowhole. So we're going to listen to all of it today.
into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times
Yes, SJB needs the blowhole. She's addicted. She has the blowhole on the mind.
every week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the like button's house and open up all of their cereal. But when you open the bags, make sure you tear them in such a way that you rip down the side of the bag, not along the intended seams at the top. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. Daniel Dukes always seemed to have an issue with respecting boundaries. In 1996,
Is this also with dick blowers?
when Daniel was 24 years old, he became obsessed with this video game series called Ultima, which in the early days of PC gaming was this huge hit. It was this open world role-playing fantasy game. Daniel figured out where the creator of this game lived, and in the middle of the night in the spring of that year, he went to this guy's house and he knocked on the door. And when the creator did not answer the door, Daniel's frustrated and he leaves, but comes back a couple hours later and proceeds to break a window, climb inside this guy's house. He goes upstairs and he goes into one of the bedrooms where he crawls into one of the beds and falls asleep. The next morning, when the creator got up, he finds Daniel laying in one of his beds and he starts yelling at him to get out of his house. And Daniel's totally unfazed and he just wants to sleep in this bed. And so the guy calls the police show up and Daniel's still in bed. And so they haul him out and they arrest him. A year later, Daniel would be arrested again for trespassing, this time in Orlando, Florida at SeaWorld, where Daniel had, after hours, snuck into the manatee exhibit and was swimming around with the manatees because apparently he wanted to play with them. But despite his criminal history, Daniel was far from a hardened criminal. In fact, many people that knew him described him as a very gentle, pot-smoking hippie who just adored animals. In 1999, when Daniel was 27, he joined a small religious community of people that practiced Hare Krishna, which is a branch of Hinduism. They get their name from their chant, Hare Krishna, that devotees repeat over and over and over again. During his stay with this community, Daniel basically blew off all of his responsibilities. He didn't really practice the religion, he didn't help out around the temple. Instead, he spent virtually all of his time feeding the wild birds that came to roost inside of the temple's garden. And he kept this notebook where he diligently tracked who had come into the garden, which bird, and how much he had fed them, and what they looked like. Basically, all he cared about were these birds. After a month of living in the Hare Krishna community, Daniel abruptly tells the other worshippers that he's going to be taking a vow of silence. And this really confused the others because Hare Krishna does not encourage its members to take vows of silence. This was something Daniel was just going to do on his own. And so right before he took his vow of silence, he also informed them that he would be leaving. So he takes his vow of silence, he packs his stuff up, and he leaves. After departing, Daniel committed a series of petty offenses.
Good God, look at that lazy eye.
Through South Carolina, Washington, Texas, and then ultimately in Florida. One of his offenses in Florida was stealing a candy bar at a 7-Eleven. And in court, because of his vow of silence that he was still living up to, he had to write on a piece of paper that he denied the charge. But ultimately, he was sent to jail for 3 days. After his stint in this Florida jail, Daniel gets out and he decides he wants to go back to Orlando, Florida, and go to the SeaWorld where he had previously jumped into the manatee exhibit. And so he was going to go and presumably check out the manatees as well as some other animals. When he got to the park, he made his way over to the killer whale demonstration where some trainers were going to be swimming around in this enclosure with these massive killer whales. And witnesses said they remember seeing Daniel in the stands watching the show being just totally transfixed and open-mouthed and fascinated with what he was looking at. But apparently Daniel's biggest reaction to any part in the show was when the trainers brought out Tilikum, the biggest killer whale ever held in captivity, measuring over 22 feet long and weighing over 12,000 pounds. Daniel was just totally taken with Tilikum. So that night, after the park shut down and everyone went home, Daniel came back, now wearing a bathing suit. He hops the fence and he sneaks back into SeaWorld the same way he did a couple years earlier when he snuck into the manatee exhibit. And somehow he managed to go through the park without being picked up on a camera, and he makes his way over to
In the dark.
the killer whale enclosure. He hops the fence, he takes off his shirt, takes off his shoes, so he's just got his bathing suit on, and he jumps into the massive pool with Tilikum. When Daniel jumped into the manatee exhibit, he had said he just wanted to play with the manatees. And so it's assumed that when he jumped in with Tilikum, he just wanted to play with Tilikum. And apparently, Tilikum was really eager to play with Daniel because Tilikum quickly played with Daniel by biting his shorts and bringing him to the bottom of the pool and dragging him along the bottom until Daniel drowned. And then after he drowned, Tilikum basically thrashed him around, throwing him up and down, ripping off pieces of him, until finally he draped Daniel's body over his back, and that's where Tilikum kept him. The next day, when the staff showed up and made this discovery, they couldn't get Daniel's body away from Tilikum because Tilikum wanted to keep his toy. And so they had to use a special medical hoist to lift Tilikum up into the air to recover Daniel's body. Daniel's death was ruled an accident as a result of his poor decision-making, and so as such, Tilikum was not punished.
Oh, thank God.
In 1910, miners drilling inside of the
This was wearing a coat.
they couldn't get Danielkum. After he drowned, Tilikum basically thrashed him around, throwing him up and down, ripping
Tilikum was having a hell of a time with this guy. Man, Tilikum really liked this guy. Just really playing with this guy.
off pieces of him until finally he draped Daniel's body over his back.
Oh, that's a real photo.
And that's where Tilikum kept him. The next day, when the staff showed up and made this discovery, they couldn't get Daniel's body away from Tilikum because Tilikum wanted to keep his toy. And so they had to use a special medical hoist to lift Tilikum up into the air to recover Daniel's body. Daniel's death was ruled an accident as a result of his poor decision-making, and so as such, Tilikum was not punished. In 1910, miners drilling inside of the Nika Cave in Chihuahua, Mexico, punctured through the ground and discovered this flooded cavern. After pumping the water out
and
stepping inside of this cavern, they were amazed to see these massive gypsum crystals that had formed on the walls and the ceiling all over this cave. Although the crystals were beautiful, they were far less valuable than what these miners were after, which was silver. So instead of trying to, mine out these crystals, they told the locals in the area that they had found this cave and that they really ought to come down here and protect it because it's this amazing natural wonder. And so for the next 100 years, the locals in Chihuahua, Mexico, basically kept this cave that they nicknamed the Cave of Swords under lock and key so that no one would go in there and destroy these amazing crystals. Fast forward to the year 2000, and two men are inside of this mine, not the Nika mine where the Cave of Swords is located, but a mine that was right up against it. And they're drilling down, and they're actually at the same level of where the Cave of Swords is located. And they don't know it yet, but they're drilling underneath the Cave of Swords. And they eventually puncture into the rock, revealing this underground flooded cavern. Now, these two men are not tracking that this is right underneath the Cave of Swords. So they're not thinking there could be crystals inside of this flooded cavern. They're thinking there could be silver down there. So after pumping all the water out of this cavern, they crawl down inside and it opens up into this massive cavern with these enormous crystals coming out of the ceiling, the walls, everywhere. And they are like 10 times, 15 times bigger than any of the biggest crystals inside of the Cave of Swords. These are literally the biggest crystals in the world. And this cavern looks like Superman's Fortress of Solitude. It's this unbelievable landscape. This new cave would be dubbed the Giant Crystal Cave, and like its counterpart, the Cave of Swords, it would be handed over to locals to protect. Now, you'd think people would be lining up like crazy to get inside either.
Oh my god, I'm a fucking idiot. I'm sorry, guys.
Of these two caves to see these natural wonders. But the truth is, nobody wants to go inside of these caves because they're death traps. Even though both of these caves have had the water drained out of them, their humidity level is still 100%, which means if you're in there too long in either of these two caves, you run the risk of your lungs starting to fill with water, effectively drowning you. In fact, scientists speculate that it would take about 10 minutes for this to happen to you if you were inside one of these caves, assuming you were not wearing. Like its counterpart, the Cave of Swords, it would be handed over to local in the world, and they crawl down inside, and it opens up into this massive cavern with these enormous crystals coming out of the ceiling, the walls, everywhere. And they are like 10 times, 15 times bigger than any of the biggest crystals inside of the Cave of Swords. These are literally the biggest crystals in the world, and this cavern looks like Superman's Fortress of Solitude. It's this unbelievable landscape. This new cave would be dubbed the Giant Crystal Cave, and like its counterpart, the Cave of Swords, it would be handed over to locals to protect. Now, you'd think people would be lining up like crazy to get inside either of these two caves to see.
Look at those fuckers. Look at that. Those are huge.
These natural wonders. But the truth is, nobody wants to go inside of these caves because they're death traps. Even though both of these
they're fucking death traps when you go there.
Caves have had the water drained out of them, their humidity level is still 100%, which means if you're in there too long in either of these two caves, you run the risk of your lungs starting to fill with water, effectively drowning you. In fact, scientists speculate that it would take about 10 minutes for this to happen to you if you were inside one of these caves, assuming you were not wearing a special breathing device that was pumping dry air back into you. But even if you were wearing these special air tanks, the cave would still kill you in about an hour because the temperature exceeds 130 degrees Fahrenheit. And so if you combine the extreme heat with the humidity and the tight enclosed nature of an underground cave, you have a natural oven that if you stay in there too long, it will cook you alive. So the only people that go inside of these caves are researchers that wear all the special equipment, and they only go inside for a couple of minutes at most. But in 2001, so 1 year after the discovery of the Big Crystal Cave, one of the workers who helped drain out the Big Crystal Cave decided, you know what, I want a crystal for myself. And so using his understanding of the mine and his access to this particular section of the mine, he made his way down and got inside of the Big Crystal Cave. Now, the only special equipment he had was a saw, because he figured he could get in there and saw off a piece of one of these crystals and get out of there in just a couple of minutes, certainly well before anything bad would happen to him.
Oh yeah, of course. And nothing bad will happen.
So he gets inside, he identifies the crystal he wants, and he starts sawing off the bottom of this crystal. But it dislodges a huge chunk of the crystal that falls on him. Now, when it fell on him, that didn't kill him, but it pinned him inside of this cave. At this point, reality must have sunk in very quickly for this guy. He didn't tell anyone where he was going because what he was doing was illegal, and he knows that nobody checks inside of these caves to see if people are trapped or stuck, because they don't expect people to go into these caves, and they're off limits. A couple of days later, researchers went down into Big Crystal Cave, and they discovered this guy still pinned underneath the big crystal he had cut from the ceiling. It was unclear whether he had died from drowning or from being cooked alive, but either way, he was deceased. To this day, Big Crystal Cave and the Cave of Swords are strictly off limits to the public.
There you go, SJB.
On June 30th, 2002, an 18-year-old named Daniel Dick was on vacation with his mother and his two younger brothers in Hawaii. Daniel had just graduated from his high school in Los Angeles, where he was the student body president. He was known to invite all of his classmates over to his house all the time for dinners, and girls would call him all the time to try to get advice about their boyfriends. And Daniel also would befriend troubled teens in an attempt to kind of pick them up and get them back on the straight and narrow. When he and his family left for this vacation, he had been working part-time at a grocery store and was getting ready to attend California State University in the fall. That morning, Daniel went down to the beach where he planned on doing some swimming and maybe laying out in the sun for a little bit, and pretty quickly he met 3 girls. And after about 30 minutes of chatting with them, he asked them if they wanted to climb over the fence and check out the blowhole. A blowhole is a fairly narrow hole that is situated on rocks right near where water is crashing. And this hole is usually formed by molten
He won't ever waste a load.
lava that is passed through underneath. And what happens is this hole is connected to a tunnel that feeds down and out into the water. So when the waves come in, they go through this tunnel and they get rocketed up this little opening, causing a massive geyser of water. Now, if you don't go near the blowhole, it's not dangerous at all. It's just a very cool natural phenomenon.
It's just a natural blowhole.
The beach that Daniel and these girls were on was situated right near an infamously dangerous blowhole called the Halona Blowhole. The reason it was so dangerous is because the water it connected to through that tunnel these girls were on was situated right near an infamously dangerous blowhole called the Halona Blowhole. The reason it was so dangerous is because the water it connected to through that tunnel was some of the most violent in all of Hawaii. So when those waves came barreling through the tunnel, it would shoot 30 plus feet in the air. And so to make sure everybody understood you're only allowed to watch the blowhole from a distance, they actually put up a fence all the way around it and put up signs saying, "Do not go any closer." To give you a sense of how powerful the water was that was churning through this tunnel, if you were standing on the other side of the fence watching the blowhole from a safe distance, you could feel the ground shaking as the waves would rumble through the tunnel and then explode out of the blowhole. According to Daniel's family and friends, he was not a reckless person. He was just
Eat your blowhole.
a very adventurous person. And so something like this blowhole really piqued his interest, and he just couldn't handle being on the outside of the fence. He really wanted to get right up there and get a look at it. In fact, he told these girls he wanted to feel the power of the water hit him in
He wanted the power of the blowhole.
the chest. That was his plan. The girls told him this was a bad idea, but he was insistent and he began walking over to the rocks where you could climb up and jump this fence. The girls went with him, but they stopped short of the fence. As Daniel made his way over to the rocks, he passed by a couple that was laying on the beach. He waved to them, he climbed up the rocks, he climbed over the fence, and he made his way over to the blowhole. And he timed it to where a wave had just come in and shot a geyser up, and then as soon as the water went down and there was a break, he walked over the edge of this hole that was not very far across, and he kind of arched himself over it so his chest was hovering right over where the water was going to come up. And initially, a wave came through and the water shot up and it hit him in the chest and it kind of staggered him back for a minute. And at this point, the three girls and the couple that he had passed are now yelling for him to get away from the blowhole, that it's way too dangerous. But it was too late. He leaned back over the blowhole right as a massive wave came barreling through the tunnel. It rocketed up and it lifted him off the ground about 5 feet in the air, and it turned him upside down so his head is pointed down. And when he fell, he went directly into the blowhole. The couple and the three girls
Is in the great almighty blowhole. The blowhole of all blowholes.
that saw this happen described his body position as being the perfect dive.
The almighty blowhole.
And in order to actually get into the blowhole, you would need the perfect body position. Because the opening is very narrow, and it goes down 8 feet of just this narrow tube. And at the bottom of that, it opens up like the inside of a teapot. And inside of there is this just vicious churning water that connects to this underground tunnel that feeds out to the sea. And so when Daniel went headfirst down, his momentum, along with his perfect body position, forced himself down through that hole into that section that's kind of like the inside of a teapot. And once you're inside, there's no way to go back up again. The opening is too tight, and there's nothing to hold on to. You wouldn't have the ability to force yourself up through that hole again. So the only way out is through the underground tunnel that leads out to the sea. But there are constantly waves pounding their way up this tunnel into the section where Daniel had fallen into. And so realistically, anybody that tries to swim through this fairly long underground tunnel is only going to get so far before a wave forces them back or traps them in some way in this underground tunnel. As soon as Daniel went into the blowhole, the couple and the three girls immediately climbed up the rocks, hopped over the fence, and began looking into the tunnel, yelling for Daniel. And as they're sitting there yelling for him and yelling for people on the beach to call 911, they would feel the ground start to shake as another wave would come through the tunnel and erupt through the blowhole. And they know every time that happened, Daniel, if he was alive, he was completely submerged in water for 30 seconds or so every iteration that this blowhole erupted. By the time the police showed up, Daniel has been trapped inside of this blowhole for some time, and no one's heard him, no one's seen him, and so it's starting to look pretty grim. And the police would say it's nearly impossible for anybody to survive being inside of this blowhole, especially at high tide, which is when he went in. In fact, the police would say, we can't even send divers in there until low tide, because if we send someone in now, they're gonna get killed inside of this blowhole. It's too violent inside of there. And so the best they could do was put a weighted line into the blowhole, anchored on the outside, so that if by some miracle Daniel was still alive, he'd be able to grab this line and pull himself up. He probably would not be able to pull himself through the hole to safety, but at least he could keep himself out of the water until rescuers could get there the next day at low tide. But when low tide came the next day and divers went out to the water, they discovered Daniel's body. It was floating near the area where water actually...
Blowhole's a real humdinger. No, it's a humbubbler. Humbubbler. It's his name. Man, my country accent is really coming out. No, that humbuggler. Oh, Jesus Christ, Majestic.
Actually gets sucked into the tunnel and out through the blowhole. During low tide, he must have been pulled back out through the tunnel out to sea. It's unclear how long Daniel was alive once he landed inside of the blowhole, or whether he ever attempted to actually swim through that tunnel out to sea. but at some point he did drown. Daniel's mother petitioned to have a metal grate put over the blowhole so that nobody else would fall in and meet the same fate as her son. But this proposal was met with criticism from the locals, who said the problem was not the blowhole. The problem was people not respecting the power of nature. And so while a fence still surrounds Halona Blowhole, telling
Respect the blowhole. God damn it.
people to stay back, the entrance to the blowhole is still uncovered. So that's going to do it, guys.
The almighty great blow her. Let's see. You know what? I might. Yo, hey, Bucci. Nice for you to show boy.
Guys, if you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments what it is and where you found it. So give us the timestamp. And if you're the first to do that, we will pin you at the top of the comments section. If you enjoyed today's video and you haven't done this already, please sneak into the like button's house and open their cereal. But when you open the bag, make sure you tear down the side of the bag, not along the intended seams at the top. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications.
Oh, man. We were watching Mr. Bowling. But that's gonna be it for me on YouTube. I'm gonna switch on over to Discord. So my Discord channel, if you want to join, is in the description. So I am going to end it here and do some stupid shit on Discord, I think. I'm just going to watch, like, stupid, like, reaction channels of... I'm trying to get caught up on this one show right now. I'm, like, doing, like, watching, but doing, like, a reaction. Well, watching people doing a reaction of is MILF Manor right now. So I've been wanting to watch it, so I'm gonna hop over to the Discord and watch that. So if you want to join, you can join. Yeah, I'll be back tomorrow. I'm getting kind of bored doing the. I mean, not doing this, but I'm just yeah. I just want to switch over, doing something else, kind of doing something silly right now. So yeah, have fun with you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow night late. And like always, hit that like, subscribe, y'all. Love you guys. I'll see y'all over on Discord. So yeah, let's go.
Marky got with Sharon, and Sharon got Sharia. She was sharing Sharon's outlook on the topic of disease. Mikey had a facial scar and Bobby was a racist. They were all in love with dying, they were doing it in Texas. Tommy played piano like a kid out in the rain, and then he lost his leg in Dallas. He was dancing with the train. They were all in love with dying, they were drinking from a fountain that was pouring like an avalanche coming down the mountain.
I don't mind the sun sometimes, the images it shows. I can taste you on my lips and smell you in my clothes. Cinnamon and sugar and softly spoken lies. You never know just how to look
hot pursuit and fiery auto crashes. Some will die in hot pursuit while sifting through my ashes. Some will fall in love with life and drink it from a fountain that is pouring like an avalanche coming down the mountain.
I don't mind the sun sometimes, the images it shows. I can taste you on my lips and smell you in my clothes. Cinnamon and sugary and softly spoken lies. You never know just how you look through other people's eyes.
Another Mikey took a knife while arguing in traffic. Flipper died a natural death, he caught a nasty virus. Then there was the ever-present football player rapist. They were all in love with dying, they were doing it in Texas. Ollie caught a bullet, but it only hit his leg. Well, it should have been a better shot, got him in the head. They were all in love with dying, they were drinking from a fountain that was pouring like an avalanche coming down the mountain.
I don't mind the sun sometimes, the images it shows.